So thank you everybody for joining us. Before we begin, what I would like to do is I would like to go over some housekeeping rules in order to help us to create a generative space, a great space where we can have a conversation with La Doctora Rodríguez today. So first things first, what I would like you to do is, if you could please stay muted as you join. And also something that I like to do in my courses is, because we know this is Zoom and it's not like a normal classroom where we can feed off of each other. What I would like us to do is to kind of step up and unmute and to participate, right? So we can appreciate our scholar who is here with us today, so we can appreciate the words and the knowledge, dropping that knowledge with us today. And so one of the key things what I would encourage people to do is, one, to feel free to use a thumbs up or to clap. If you want to appreciate something and if you heard something you like, feel free to use those emojis. And also be aware of your video and your audio settings. And I encourage you to, again, step up, unmute, and participate. And if you like, feel free to appreciate yourself on video. So if you like, you could turn on your video right now so we can, again, encourage Dr. Rodríguez during her talk. And we were just joined by one of our hosts, el Doctor Topete and Doctora Revilla.
Saludos, everyone.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
And so before we begin with this incredible presentation, I would like us to do a land acknowledgement. And so by doing this land acknowledgement, what I want to introduce to you is kind of like a 3-breath practice, right? Where we're going to be taking a deep breath and we're going to be acknowledging land, labor, and life. And so what I would like us to do right now is to begin by doing this acknowledgement. So I would like us to all take a deep breath right now together. I would like us to take this deep breath because this is part of this land, labor, and life acknowledgement. And I want to thank our colegas in Pan-African Studies and Dr. Melina Abdullah, who crafted some of these statements. I would like to take notice that we are right now currently in an occupied and stolen territory that I'm currently situated in. I'm currently located in Los Angeles, in East LA, the ancestral territory of the Tangva, the Gabrielino people, the First Nation peoples of Los Angeles. I also would like to acknowledge the occupied territory that you are on right now. Perhaps we're not in the same territory. So if you would like to share the indigenous name of the territory that you are currently residing in, feel free to drop that in the chat box. One thing I want to remind y'all is we pay respect to the Tangva and the Gabrielino and all indigenous people, past, present, and future, to show reverence and to call in their continued presence within these spaces, these academic spaces that so much doesn't include them, even in these virtual spaces. So again, I would like us to take another deep breath. We pay homage to those who were stolen from Africa, placed in bondage, falsely named as chattel, and forced into labor, who were called slaves, but never submitted as such, who have always been fully human with an unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor our African ancestors for their still unpaid labor, which built what is now the Americas. Let's take one more deep breath. To both our indigenous and African forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is only through freedom and justice that we will truly give honor. To all my relations, aho ashe. Thank you. So I would like to take a moment to introduce Doctora Revilla and Topete, who are also our co-hosts for today. Y'all want to say a few words?
Sure. Saludos, everyone, and thank you, Kaelyn, Doctora Rodríguez, for joining us. And I see many of our students who I got to teach last year or this year, so I'm really grateful to have you here. I just wanted to recognize that Professor Solorzano and Topete are teaching a similar class with me. It's a CLS 1200. Many of you are in it or have taken it. It's like an intro class to race, class, and gender through a Chicanx Latinx perspective. So that's how we came together to do this lecture series. But I think it's taking us in a whole different level, right? It's taking us in a community building and in a knowledge production space. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that great introduction, Professor Solorzano, and thank you for all sharing this space for this very important conversation. And I'm honored to be here and grateful as well. So thank you so much.
Gracias to my colega. So let's get this started. Let me go ahead and introduce to everybody the amazing Dr. Rodríguez. So I'm just going to share a little bio with all of you before she begins. So I have the honor to present to you Dr. Kaelyn Rodríguez. In the fall of 2014, I met Dr. Rodríguez as my new colleague. We're both part of UCLA's Ph.D. cohort in the Department of Chicana, Chicano, and Central American Studies. For the next 5 years while at UCLA, we had the opportunity to not only take classes together, but to work alongside one another as editors for an online publication called Voz Alta. And this publication brought together artists, activists, and scholars into a collaborative space where we would publish and uplift and celebrate innovative forms of knowledge production. Early on, Kaelyn was our in-house art historian. She taught us everything about art. And I had the privilege to learn for the next few years from Dr. Rodríguez about art movements here, in the United States, specifically in Los Angeles. She taught us how we should be speaking about Chicanx, Latinx, Black and Afro-Latinx history through the arts, through murals, through spaces and places. Not sure if, I just found out, but I think she's gonna be sharing with you about her summer fellowship that she had with Spark and Chicana muralist Judy Baca, where she engaged in this work, which was a 50th anniversary commemorative mural project dedicated to the Watts Rebellion. And I know many of you read about the Watts Uprising of 1965, which was a crucial turning point in LA's civil rights movement. I am proud to say that Dr. Rodríguez's teaching practice and vision has taught me how to teach LA's multiracial history through the arts. So I'm pleased to present to you Dr. Rodríguez, but before she introduces herself, I need to brag about her accomplishments. Dr. Rodríguez is an assistant professor of art history at Santa Monica College. Her research and teaching interests are art historiography of Black and Brown Los Angeles, development of Black and Brown art enclaves and movements, and Afro-Latinx futurism. Kaelyn's early research in Chicana, Chicano studies combined art making, art history, geography, and social activism in South Los Angeles. These projects yielded a mapping methodology, which she called Emoji Mapping. Currently, she is working on celebrating coalitional and spatial connections between Black, Latinx, and Afro-Latinx visual culture, where she advances exciting concepts of Black, Latinx, Afro-Latinx solidarity via visual arts throughout Los Angeles' rich history, a concept she calls Afro-Latinx futurism. She is currently working on an exhibition with the Smithsonian's Archives of American Art and has published in Diálogo Journal, Urban Humanities Journals, and also was a co-editor of Voz Alta's editions, Voz Alta for Black Lives and Tierra Sagrada. She is a proud Cal State University system alumni. She received her BA from Fresno State, go Bulldogs, and then her History of Art Master's from UC Riverside. She completed her doctorate at UCLA in the Department of Chicana, Chicano, and Central American Studies, and while at UCLA, received various fellowships. And lastly, when Kaelyn isn't being a profe or a teacher, she's cooking, gardening, or making magic in her kitchen. So please join me in welcoming my colega, my friend, my femtor, and your guest speaker, Dr. Kaelyn Rodríguez. Show her some love, folks.
Goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow, blessed. Thank you all so much. I'm truly, like, my heart is with you all. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be in this space with you all today. So thank you. Thank you, Rafa, my amazing colleague. And I hope you all, like, one thing that I hope you are getting from the way that Professor Solorzano and I are engaging each other is through love, right? one of the things about being in school is definitely learning and finding your personal power, but building community, right? And we do that with the people we're in classes with, the people that we are in clubs with, in groups with. And here you see, after 5-6 years of working together, sharing space, learning from each other, here we are lifting each other up in our professional lives. So this is like just layers and layers of honor and love, and I share that with you all. And I hope that you take that with you. You take this idea with you that even though we're meeting in these Zoom meetings and we have these sort of like, you know, Jeopardy boxes or whatever, that there are still people and places to be your most beautiful self and to grow as scholars and activists, and however you're, you know, whatever your natural talents and gifts are to share with the world. Here we are doing that with each other. So thank you so much, Rafa. And thank you to all the colleagues here. I see you. I appreciate you. And I don't know what else to say besides let's get started, because I'm already just like overflowing with love and appreciation. And I don't want to like just stay there. I want to show you the work, right? I want to show you the work that I've been doing over the years. So I'm going to present my screen share with you all. And I want to be timely about this presentation. Ooh, my goodness, I'm all out of order here. Sorry, folks. But if you do have questions, I'm happy to take them at the end. I think we'll do a Q&A towards the end. And any questions or comments or feedback is totally welcome. Sorry, I'm gonna just try to get this from the beginning. Okay, here we go. So this is my work, and it's called Afro-Latinx Futures, Creative Freedom Dreaming in Watts. This is me, I'm Kaelyn Rodríguez, or Profesora, or Dr. Rodríguez, if you will. What I'm gonna share with you today is I'm gonna introduce the work that I did at UCLA, my master's work and my PhD research. This is, I'll share with you how I got started and what it took for me to do the work. And then later on, I'll share with you, I'll locate my political and personal motivation and my own stakes in these works and the projects that I was doing. And then I'll discuss 2 case studies. So instead of just talking about my work, I'll show it to you. I'll play it out with you. And then at the end, again, we'll take questions and answers. Or hopefully I can give answers. So you might have seen this in your syllabus, or you might have seen this in other places. This was basically the culmination of my master's research that I finished in, I think it was 2016, maybe 2017, this mural. So I'm starting at the end, and that's a weird place to begin, right? So I want you to know that in my graduate work, I made a mural. I helped to create a mural. And if you are like me and you grew up wanting to make art or just be creative, I want you to know there's room for that too, right? There's room for that in scholarship. And this is my scholarship through this mural. But it didn't start here, right? You can't just make a mural in one day. It started, as Professor Solorzano mentioned, it started at Spark. Spark is the Social and Public Art Resource Center. They're located in Venice, California, in West LA. And in the summer of 2015, I was a research fellow with my advisor, Professor Judy Baca. And this was just like an amazing opportunity for me to figure out what I was gonna do in grad school, right? People start grad school and don't always know what we wanna do. And this was the place where I found my roots, I found my footing. And so while I was at Spark, I was a part of the team, right? I was a member of a number of people there working there. And while I was there, we were working on an application. The Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs put out a call. Remember, this is 2015. They put out a call to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the 1965 Watts Rebellion. And so there was already this sort of like public interest in remembering what happened in Watts in 1965, but also thinking about where Watts was at that moment and what was the future for Watts. So once we started working on this application, once we started dreaming up, well, what would a mural like that look like? How could we tell that type of a story in an image? Oh my gosh, it was like coming home. I knew that was my work. I knew that that was my project to do. And so I just stuck with it from there. And I learned a lot about making a mural from scratch, building community. And so one of the things that we did was, you know, I'm at UCLA at this time, right? I'm living near campus. I was living in Culver City at the time, working in Venice. So I'm spending a lot of my time in West LA, and Watts is in South Central, right? So we were very mindful that we needed to build community. We didn't want to tell a story. We didn't want to represent a history of a community without their coming from their voices. We needed to center those folks, right? So we were really intentional about building community, and that was my job for like a year. I was a part of just a part of a community group called I Heart Watts. I wasn't painting. I wasn't, setting up, scaffolding. I was getting to be a member of the community. And so here you see me with the group. We're over here selling t-shirts. We were at Ciclavia. We did different events. And even before we introduced the idea that we wanted to create a mural, it was really important again for us to build trust with people, right? Because we knew that we can't just go into this community and ask them for personal stories, right? That's really problematic. We see that in academia all the time. So we needed to move differently. And this was a layered idea because although I'm from Los Angeles, I'm a Black woman, I'm overworked, underpaid, student loans, right? All of these things that might be similar to the community we were working with. I'm also coming from a position of privilege, being from UCLA, having an institution behind me, having access to resources. So my thought was, how can I leverage this? How can I use my privilege and my resources to serve this community? So that's what we did. We got to know the folks, and we tried all the ways that we could to lift up their stories and lift up their voices. So here you see us doing that work. And after about 6 months of just laying a foundation for building trust and getting to know people, we did another event called the I Heart Watts Picnic. This was organized by the group we were a part of, so we just went along with that. But here's where we started learning more of those personal stories. So we found that we had limitations in asking people about their lives, in trying to do a formal interview. There were a number of limitations, and we didn't want to move that way. So we decided to come up with an alternative method, right? And this is where being a creative can really serve you and serve the people you're working with, is we came up with this thing called Emoji Mapping. And it's exactly what it sounds like, right? So here you see me with people in the community, and you see two folks sitting down and actually making these emoji maps. So emoji maps are maps where people can literally cut, scissors and tape paper emojis onto a physical map to place their lives. And so in this way, they're telling us about both the built environment, they're telling us about what's the neighborhood look like, where they go shopping, where they eat, etc. They're also telling us about their personal lived experience, where things happen to them, how their life has unfolded. And when we were doing this, it was absolutely amazing. I was amazed at how people were finding these exercises to be a way of coming home to themselves, a way of understanding their own lives. People were telling us like, wow, this was so cathartic. This was, makes me feel proud to be from Watts, makes me realize like, wow, a lot of things happened to me on 103rd Street. We had one of our community members tell us he met his first girlfriend there on a particular block. He got in his first fight on that block. He got his heart broken on that block. And he just told us, you know, a lot of living happened right here on this intersection. And that was a beautiful way of understanding how he belonged in that space and capturing memories that we wouldn't have been able to ask him if we had done a formal sit-down interview. We wouldn't have had any way of knowing of those particular events in his life spatially. So we found that these maps were incredibly powerful resources for us to learn about people, but for the people to feel close to who they are and where they're from. And that was amazing. And so we used what we found, what we learned, and updated our design for the mural. So here you see, this is like a sketch, one of our earlier sketches in the design process. And you'll see the mural is depicted on top of the auditorium on the facade of the building. This is a closer rendering. So we have a few kids up front here. And then what seems very prominent to me is this hand and this lotus and this leaf. They're sort of balancing each other out on both sides of the composition. But we're not necessarily getting a lot about people. We're not necessarily learning about people's experiences. So we ended up using what we learned, what we continue to learn in the mural. So while we did the emoji mapping at community picnics and different community groups with adults, we also were doing workshops with students. I personally led about 4, maybe 5 workshops at Markham Middle School, which is again the school where the mural was going to be installed. So we worked with the local students there. We taught them about the history of Watts from 1965, but also the art movement that came out of South Central in the 1960s and 70s, and help them place themselves in these creative movements. So you'll see us talking to students here, and these two young folks ended up in our final rendering. So you see them both here. And what's really cool about including them in this way is these are all self-portraits, right? So this is, again, another way for the community members and the individuals to own their story, to represent it the way that they want to represent it, and for them to be the center. So you'll notice in the earlier rendering, I think I have a comparison here. This wasn't super useful. Like maybe it was kind of like, you know, aesthetically pleasing maybe, but it didn't really serve the community, right? So we found ways to make the kids bigger. So instead of having 3 kids a little smaller in the front, we put 6 kids and we made them take up more space. So again, we're centering them. They're becoming a way that we're thinking about the future of Watts, right? So we definitely are, of course, rendering the past through these silhouettes of National Guard from the 1965 rebellion. But we're encapsulating the present and the future with this ellipsis, this shape right here. And showing, again, what's possible. So the more that we're learning from the community, the more you see that reflected in the body of the mural. So some of the research that I was also in charge of doing was finding some of those artworks from the art movement in the 1960s. So we have here, we placed the Mafundi Institute mural that actually exists in Watts. Here we placed it in the physical space. Here we have the Mother of Humanities sculpture that exists at the WLCAC. We made it large so that you could see it in the mural. And as you look at it really closely, there's all these little beautiful Easter eggs and hints of the art movements, the innovation, and the beautiful lives that people in Watts were dreaming up for themselves. For example, the city being more accessible by bike. That was one of the things that we heard from the community. So you'll see bicyclists in moving through the streets. We have, you know, a pool and a football field and places for people to, you know, grow their own produce, and places where people can green spaces in Watts. And of course, the amazing music that comes out of the community. And you can't make a picture of Watts without the Watts Towers, right? So all of this data we're gathering, we're putting it right back in. And as we, you know, thinking about Watts as a community, we're also thinking about it spatially. So you'll see that even within here is a map of Watts, right? So there's a lot of different things going on in the mural. But this is what we did, and we spent a few years working on this, working with students, working with teachers, working with community groups. I personally interviewed elders, police officers, stakeholders, all kinds of people to make sure that this image resonated and came from the community it was meant to serve. So here it is. Here it is. This is what it looks like if you roll up on Markham Middle School. It's actually on the facade of the auditorium on the outside. And then that was sort of like it for my master's. And when I was done, I was like, you know, this was really important. I felt deeply empowered. I had worked on murals before, but none as meaningful as this one personally. And it made me wonder, what was before 1965, right? Because when we talk about Watts, that's usually where we start. How was it that Watts was a place where people of color, not just Black people, Latinx people, Asian American people were living in Watts during this incredible moment of discrimination and physical violence against these communities that were surrounded by white neighborhoods, right? So like, how did that happen? Because Watts is really small. Watts is like 2 square miles. So how is it that we have this like 2 square mile swampy area where people of color exist, and then the rest of South Central is like extremely white? Like, how did that happen? And then wondering also about the future. So like moving backwards and moving forward, like what was the difference between 1965 and 1992? And all of these questions really pushed me to zoom out into the larger area of Los Angeles, to be able to try to tell a story, to be able to try to understand these questions. And that pressed me into my doctoral research. The name of my dissertation is Afro-Latinx Futurism, a history of Black and Brown arts in Los Angeles. So really my doctoral research starts in the 1700s, really early, and it moves all the way to pretty much the current moment. So it's very expansive. But the point of that is to indicate that the technologies and the methodologies for moving in solidarity, for moving in coalition, for sharing power, sharing community, and expressing creative movements didn't start in 1965. My argument is that it has existed as long as Los Angeles has been Los Angeles. And so that's why I needed to start in the colonial moment in 1781. The questions I was asking for my dissertation more specifically were, what are the anti-colonial and anti-racist traditions that Black and Brown Angelenos have created to not only make art, but to express cultural pride and solidarity? So it was important for me that I already knew this was true, How did they do it? What are those traditions? And so for me, this is also deeply personal, right? Just like all scholarship is, this is coming out of my own lived experience as a person, you know, as an Afro-Latina myself with an African-American mama and a Mexican-American daddy. Here, I knew that Black and brown love existed. That was the first thing I might have ever known about life, right? I knew that Black and brown family existed because that's my family. So it was very easy for me to know that these things were true, but I wanted to create evidence and provide examples to show this. So here's my little family, circa, I don't know. This might be from like 1992 or something, I don't know. And then this is a little bit longer, but this is really, I think, the most important contribution that I have to offer from my dissertation. So I'll read this to you all. As a way of anticipating and believing in our freedom, our pleasure, our joy, ease, and our rest, I ask, how do we get there from here? How does our current suffering connect to our future ease? Are we practiced in our own beauty and play so that we can be fully present for our freedom? Once our fighting has opened way for us to be free, will we know how to enjoy it? Will it have the residue of struggle and resistance attached? And if we don't believe it's possible in the future, then what does our current struggle mean, right? So this is me adamantly like embodying, believing in our freedom, believing so much that we have to ask questions like this, right? Like, doesn't mean we have to enjoy pleasure and freedom and ease 100% right now. But if we don't believe that it's possible for us, then really what are we doing, right? Because I personally don't believe we are meant to just only struggle. The struggle is a method for getting towards freedom, right? So understanding what it's for and understanding who we are as we move forward. And for me, there was lots of evidence through the art histories that I was referring to, through the literature and the scholarship that I moved through. These are some examples of the places that I found people finding freedom, finding solidarity in freedom. And it was so, again, it was like coming home, seeing these art histories, seeing these bodies of literature, because I knew, again, it wasn't a modern technology. It's something that's existed for like forever, probably, but in my research, for at least several hundred years. Okay, so as a way of putting these questions to the test, I looked at a number of works of art to identify where Black and brown people have been in solidarity and how that solidarity has worked towards our collective freedom. And so here's just a really amazing example. This is by two queer artists, Alma Lopez and Noni Alabise, just an amazing artistic duo. They created this mural in 1998 called Education is a Basic Human Right. And this mural exists in the Angeles Mesa branch public library, the Los Angeles Public Library System, and it's in South Central. So please excuse the photographs. This mural is very difficult to photograph because of the hanging lanterns. So there are a few visual limitations here. But here we do see sort of similar to the mural that I helped work on at Spark, a mural that is capturing more than one moment in time, right? We see a couple of different historic cases unfolding. So in the background, we see Mendes versus Westminster, which, are you all familiar with this case? Okay, so, okay. So, right, so this is a really important case for Latinos accessing education outside of a segregated concept in California. And then Mendes versus Westminster, if you're not familiar, became the legal precedent for Brown versus Board of Education, right? And Brown versus Board was the sort of the federal move where we, as a country, made segregation in schools unconstitutional. I'm not saying that segregation ended at this time, but legally, this is where this is coming from, right? So we're seeing that in the black and white depictions in the top register of the painting. I have some details here. So even here, you see the artists are cleverly including the names Mendes and Brown. We have the Mendes family here, and historic images of the children who are going to school in the moment of the Brown versus Board of Education political spectacle. And then in the middle, do I have another detail? No, sorry about that. In the middle, we see the sort of contemporary, right? And this was made in the 90s. So we see students who are Black and Brown students protesting Prop 209. We see them using the US flag to reframe this idea of belonging, to reframe the idea of justice. And so here they are using the flag as a sort of poster, political poster, saying education is a basic human right. And then in the foreground, in the foremost part of this image, we have two elders who have since passed on. We have a Black woman here, perhaps a sharecropper, picking cotton, right? And a Latinx man here picking strawberries. These crops and these people are specific, I spoke with the artists, are specific to reminding us that our ancestors built this country. They are the ones feeding and clothing and providing infrastructure. We deserve education. If we want to think about it like this, our ancestors paved the way for us to have an education. And this is what the artist told me. This is why they included this section in the image here, as a way of honoring what's come before, but also remembering like we come from a line that has created this world. And so we deserve an education. That's the least they could do, right? That's the least we deserve. And then the last case study I'll offer is by Jessie Jumanji. If you're on Instagram, she's an amazing person to follow. This is called Barty Lisa from 2018. So let me tell you a little bit about this image. Anyone ever seen this before? This might be the most famous image or historical painting in the world. This is the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. And it was made in the early Italian Renaissance. This image, although it's incredibly famous, has a very weird story. It really shouldn't even have been famous. Mona Lisa was painted as like a new bride here. And this is like her husband commissioned this painting to mark their marriage, to mark their union. But her husband was a merchant. He happened to have some money, but he wasn't from a upper class position. So at this time, portraits, paintings are reserved for the elite, like kings and queens, noblemen and women, and that's about it. So to have like an everyday person make a portrait is incredibly remarkable, really wasn't something that had ever happened up until this point. Also just the technique that Leonardo used is very unique. These are some of the things that set this image apart. Now, when this image was made, some people considered Mona Lisa to be an ugly woman. They didn't like the way she was sitting. It wasn't an instant success. The reason this image has become so popular is because of the history it's experienced over the years. But when it was first made, it wasn't a big deal. It was actually kind of a weird painting. But that being said, it has become central to the canon, right? Central to art history. And so here we see Jessie Jumanji being incredibly playful and celebrating the queen, right, of trap, the trap Selena herself, Cardi B, right? This is my queen, at least. So here we see Jessie Jumanji like time traveling, putting Cardi B in the 1500s, right? Here we see Cardi B as you know, someone to be painted, someone to be looked upon, not just a powerful lyricist and an entertainer, but like a formal part of art history, right? Imagine placing Cardi B into the Renaissance itself and putting an Afro-Latina at the heart of a very Western canon, right? This is really disrupting what we think about when we think about the Mona Lisa from a conventional standpoint. And so this for me is where I advance this concept of Afro-Latinx futurism, which again is playful, it's pleasure, it's ease, it's rest, right? And I use these terms because these are terms that usually our communities haven't had an abundance of rest, right? Usually our communities are overworked. Usually our communities are underpaid. And when we see instances where we are represented playfully or restful or beautifully, or in a way that's pleasurable, right? Like I get pleasure looking at this image. This is for us, right? This is about us. This centers those things. And the question that I asked earlier, like, are we gonna be ready to be free when that time opens up for us? These are the ways that I practice that. And it's really fun for me to do this. And I feel that art history is a great place to do this because images are both real and imagined at the same time. And so we can understand the history of something or the historiography of something while still being incredibly imaginative and creative and playful. And so that's why I love fucking up art history, because it's just not expected. And here's this space for us where we get to be as fun, as creative, as playful, as restful as we want. So I think that's really where I'm gonna conclude my discussion, and I'll just finish with this quote by Robin Kelly where he says, "Call me utopian, but I inherited my mother's belief that the map to a new world is in the imagination, in what we see in our third eye, rather than in desolation that surrounds us." And I absolutely carry this with me. I move in this way, and this is how I practice art history as an art historian and as a scholar of ethnic studies. So that's it. Thank you, and I'll turn it over for question and answer.
Let's show her some Zoom love, everybody.
Woo!
Woo!
Yes.
Look at all those claps.
Thank you all. Thank you so
So
much.
powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow. Where do we go from here, Anita? I have so many questions, but we got to allow some of our participants.
Yes,
Do you want to get us
absolutely.
started, maybe?
I would love to get us started.
And I can capture any questions that people might have in the chat.
Yes, and if people have questions that and you don't want to write them in the chat, we welcome you to interact and talk and share. Just raise your hand, your little blue hand or your actual physical hand, so that we know that you have a question. We would love to get as many as we can in the next few minutes. Kaelyn, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for having the spirit of hope. And I like the ease and the rest, right? Because so many of us in the midst of all this grief and rage that we're feeling right now are unable to imagine ease and rest, much less freedom, right? And I know that Afrofuturists and Afro-Latinx futurists and Latinx futurists are steadily trying to push us to imagine that future, because if we don't, it just won't get created, right? So thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, because this has been coming up in conversation both with my colegas and with my students, what is your engagement with anger and rage,
Yeah.
right? And I know, and I can have a sense that your work is a response to the rage. But I know that, folks right now are very much, paying heed to the uses of anger. And my thing is that I always worry that we stay in the anger and that we use the anger to harm one another. And so I wonder if you have any insight that you can share about how to negotiate both the rage internally and the collective rage that we're feeling as people, as community and siblings right now.
Yeah, thank you. Such an important question. I'm so happy to be starting in this direction. Anger is real, and anger is, it can be useful, right? So I don't want to, y'all don't know me. Most of y'all don't know me personally. So I don't want you to think I'm just like, into cute stuff all the time. I have anger, don't be mistaken. But at the same time, I think when I think about freedom, I wonder, well, what gives way to freedom, right? Like, if we're working towards it, how do we get there? And I think anger, the way I understand anger is as a result of our true hurt, as a result of our actual pain, our sadness, our suffering, and those things are 100% real. And I think the truth is, I would say we need to feel that. We do. We need to feel through them. But we can do it consciously with the knowledge that we don't need to stay in our anger. We don't need to stay there forever, right? Like, that's not, it doesn't need to become a permanent emotion or a part of our personality, if you will. And I think that's a hard thing to say, right? It can take years to move through your anger. So if it takes us time, take the time. Use your beautiful life to move through those emotions, right? And for me, like at UCLA, I had the opportunity to have be in therapy because of my insurance through UCLA. So I was able to see a therapist for years for free. And that was a huge asset to me, to be able to move through like old hurt, childhood hurt, and figure out, well, who is this person without that hurt in the front, right? And what does it look like when I'm actually me, the true me, right? Not the hurt me, not the wounded me, not the things I'm responding to, but the true me inside. And that takes work. And I would say we can do that work, and that's good work to do, right? Like, it's so useful. It's so useful for us to move and get clarity from those emotions. And all emotions are signals. They're all knowledge. They're all indicating to us where we're at, and they're trying to help us figure out how to get better from there, right? So I think don't downplay your emotions. If you have anger, if you have rage, be aware of them, feel them, write about it, cook through it, exercise through it, speak through it, see a therapist if you can. Whatever technologies and techniques you have, apply them. But be mindful about, what do you want out of this anger? What do you want out of that?
Thank you. That's so insightful. I appreciate that. And I will continue to work and process it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And we're never done, right? It's never like, okay, I'm done with my anger for my life. We'll always be practicing. So,
Kaelyn, we got a couple Let's see if we have enough time for you to answer some of these questions. There's actually 2 questions about your career or your career path. Um, so first one, Priscilla asked, what made you decide to choose this career path, right? To become a profesora, right, of art history. But also Abby asked, was there ever a moment that you wanted to give up in college? And I think this right now rings for so many students.
Yeah, okay. When I was a child, art was my first language. This was the way that I experienced the world. And luckily, my mom, who just had the amazing foresight to let me do that. She didn't discourage me. She gave me room to be in the arts. And so I felt that I had permission to be in the arts. And when I went to college, Cal State Fresno, I just needed to be around art. And so that's what I did. I actually, my bachelor's degree is in studio art with an emphasis in art history. So most of my education, I was making things with my hands and learning about the history of objects. I had an amazing experience in college because that was who I truly was a creative person. So feeding that was absolutely amazing. But when I got to grad school, I wanted to die. It was the worst. It was just, I had a lot of hurt. Like, you talk about pain and anger. I had a lot of hurt going into grad school, coming out of grad school. And so, yeah, I definitely thought about quitting. I thought about all kinds of stuff. But what helped me in the end was, first of all, I'm like a super Capricorn. So anything I do is, I'm, even if I hate it, like, I'm very stubborn. So I kind of just was like, I'm going to finish this degree just to stick it to these people. And then the other part was I met Judy Baca, and I found space at Spark for me to be who I actually am and for me to be safe. So it was the fact that I found community, that I didn't have to fake who I was, that I could speak the way that was natural to me, and having other people like support that and just be my friend even. That's what got me through.
There are a few questions about the mural or your work in Watts.
Yeah.
So Wendy asks, why did you choose that middle school? Why was that middle school the one that you chose for the mural? And also Areli asked if there were other places where you raised awareness in this way with the emoji mapping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had already had relationships at Markham Middle School. So it made sense for us to work with institutions that we had relationships with. We were also, there's a school, elementary school in Watts called the Judy Baca Arts Academy. So we were working between that school and Markham. So we were just sort of like looking at the pipeline, right? So like some of those younger children at the elementary school were being, once they went to middle school, they would go to Markham. So we were just thinking about that continuity and the relationships that we had already had in the community. And also, if you've ever been to Markham, you'll know that it's full of murals. Like, we have a mural on the facade, but if you visit the campus, there are like dozens of murals all over. So they are proponents for the arts. So that was an easy pitch, right? Just knowing our audience. And then other places where we did emoji mapping, we did it with adults and children at the events I mentioned, the picnic. I personally did a few workshops at Markham, and I also did some more like a year later, excuse me, for my research. Those were a little less formal, but those were, and I also did some in Leimert Park and Baldwin Hills with different groups to get a sense of Black community in different places. But those were some of the larger groups when we had larger audiences.
Someone asked, and I think it was Jennifer, is when exactly was it when you were selling those T-shirts for Watts?
Yeah, that was for the Ciclavia event.
Okay.
So you see that funny picture I put with the like Chewbacca guy or whatever. So there were lots of people like dressing up and just promoting the event. So yeah.
Well, I think we only have 2 more minutes. Anita, what do you think? There's 2 more questions.
Yeah, ask both of them, and then we can finish with a question and a photo before we let Doctora Rodríguez leave us.
So Marie asked, and I think it really speaks to what you were talking about anger earlier, is what is the way that you work through your, say, inner child troubles, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps trauma as an adult now. And now that you're aware of these obstacles, like how do you work through that?
Yeah, so that's such a great question, you know, and the truth is, again, like it's about healing, right? And healing is not linear. Healing, we have to be intentional about our healing, come back to our healing time and time again. For me, there's different ways that I do that. I journal. I've always kept a journal, and the written word is a safe place for me. Having a therapist helps. And also I do different meditations on, I use YouTube, different meditations. So there's certain people that I'll listen to for different things, right? So, you know, let's say I'm angry at my mom, just as an example, right? There's a really great video or, you know, YouTube link that I'll listen to that is like guiding you on reframing the relationship you have with your mother, right? Like imagine yourself as like a little 6-year-old, and I imagine 6-year-old Kaelyn, and I'm like, oh, she's so sweet, she's so good, like she's just, you know, got everything ahead of her. And then they're like, put her in your heart. Now imagine your mom at 6 years old, and you're like, oh, my mom at 6 years old, she's so good, she's so sweet, I love her so much. And put her in your heart and let those 2 little 6-year-olds like see what happens when they're together. And just, you know, and that works for me, right? That might like sound totally nuts to you, whatever. But there are different exercises like that I'll do. And then, you know, forgiveness is something that we have to do over and over again, right? Especially if we have a very pronounced experience of trauma against with a particular person or event or place. It won't, you know, when we talk about trigger warnings, it's important to know that we have that trigger, but it's important to work on it too, and not just let it sit there and expire. So there's a lot of emotional work in the work that I do to bring to my research, because I can't write about joy while I'm in pain. And if you ever read my dissertation, it absolutely shows up that though I'm doing that emotional work, because I literally cannot write like that. I can't even say those words out of my mouth if it's not true in my spirit. So that's the type of person I am, but I'm also an artsy fartsy person. So that's just me. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but those are the ways that I work through some of that stuff.
I think the artsy fartsy people will be our leaders into that healing space. So thank you for being a model. Now I just want to go get your dissertation. I want to like listen to that YouTube link. I want to go do some art with you. So you're amazing. Thank you. I know we are out of time. There are a couple more questions, but we'll email them to you, or maybe people can reach out. But I think we've had such a beautiful, wonderful conversation. So Rafa, do you have any closing comments, or should we take our photo and then say some closing comments?
Yes, let's take that photo and then show her some love at the end.
Andale. I'm going to take 2, one with the gallery view and one with the speaker view. So first I'll do the speaker view and then the gallery view so that folks can come on their camera if they have a chance. So Kaelyn, let me get you, I'm going to pin your video. And if we could all just do a quick smile, I would appreciate it. 1, 2, 3. All right, now I'm gonna do, I'm gonna unpin it and do a gallery view photo. Come on, camera if you're there. Thank you. I even see my Facebook friends. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Real quick, 1, 2, 3. Una más, just in case you blinked. 1, 2, 3. Gracias. Go ahead, Rafa.
Okay. Well, if everybody can join me in giving a bravo and applause for an amazing talk by Doctora Rodríguez.
Yes, thank you. Woo!
Also, I think a lot of people want to know how they can take your art class at Santa Monica College to get art credit.
Yeah, I mean, I teach a lot. I'm teaching a lot. So the semester's already started, but if you want to, I'm teaching African art history over the winter session. That's an amazing class that y'all can definitely take. My US class is also amazing. My Latin American class is really, really good. So just, peep me on the upcoming winter or spring, spring semester.
What's the best way to keep in touch with you? Do you prefer email, social media?
Yeah, email is good. I'll put my email right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a Instagram page for like my professional, life. So I'll put that too.
Yes, please share it. Thank you so much.
I think it's, I gotta double check. I think it's Professor Art World on Instagram.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Everybody who's got to go, you're free to go. We'll share the recording and Profe Rodríguez's